Hi, I'm Shane Smith, the owner of Genesis Offroad. In this video, I'm going to show you just how easy it is to install our dual battery system in the 2018 and up Jeep Wrangler JL. I'll show you what comes with our kit, what else you're going to need, all the tools we're going to use, and I'll walk you through the installation step by step. Okay, first let's take a look at what comes with our kit. You're going to get this new steel battery tray that's going to replace the stock plastic battery tray. You're going to get this top lid that's all completely pre-wired for you right out of the box, so there's no wiring for you to have to do at all to install dual batteries. And you'll get a bag of hardware that's used to hold down the top plate on top of the batteries. That's all the hardware that's needed. You'll reuse some of the stock components, but there's no drilling, no cutting, no modifying of any kind to the vehicle to install this kit. Now you're also going to need a couple of Group 25 size batteries. Now you can use any brand of batteries that you like. They just need to be a Group 25 size to fit our tray. So when you drop two batteries down in the tray, like this top plate is going to sit on top of the batteries to hold them down, and all the wiring is going to line right up with the battery posts, so there's no guesswork on how to hook it all up. Here's the tools you're going to need for installation. Okay, before we get started, let's just take a look at what we've got to work with here. So our kit is designed to replace the stock plastic battery tray with our new steel tray. So that means we've got to get all this stuff out of the way first. So it may look a little bit intimidating, but don't worry, it's actually very simple. The power steering bottle is going to stay on a little tab on our tray, so that stays in the stock location. Air box stays right there. The fuse box, we're going to move that straight down a few inches because there's very little real estate to mount anything else under the hood on the JLs. So we're trying to clear up a little bit of space here. So we're going to move that fuse box down, and eventually we'll probably make a new little bracket that ties in here and let you mount an S-Pod or some other device there, trying to give you a little extra room. So to get this going, first we're going to disconnect the battery, and then we're going to kind of start from the front and just kind of work our way backwards towards the fuse box and get everything out of our way. Okay, let's get started by pulling this battery out of here using a 10mm socket. And pull this little sleeve off. And then there's a little bracket right down here that holds the battery in place. We'll remove that with our cordless drill. There's a couple of bolts at the front of the vehicle that holds the air intake tube in place. We're going to pull those out too to make it easier to get this air box off. Then we'll use an 8mm socket to pull the cover off the air box. And also loosen this clamp with the 8mm. Now this cover pops off. One more 10mm bolt here on the fender. Now this air box is just going to pop out, lift it up. We'll use a 10mm to take this power steering fluid bottle off of the battery tray. And this will just set over here out of the way. Now we'll start removing all the 10mm bolts that we can see in the battery tray and two up here by the fender. Okay, now we're ready to start removing the fuse box. We'll start by taking this cover off right here. Okay, let's talk about this fuse box for a second. On the JKs, you only had one power feed coming in and feeding power from the battery to the entire fuse box. On our 2018 JL, we actually have 6 leads that come into the fuse box. So there's definitely a lot more wiring going on here. So we do need to remove each one of these ring terminals here off of the fuse box. So to help make sure that we don't end up with a big mess, what I've done is I've used a red Sharpie to label each one of these terminals, starting with 1, 2, 3. Now on our JL, there's no wire connected to post number 4 right here. So this is 5, 6, and 7. So we'll go ahead and loosen each one of these with a 10mm. Okay, on the bottom side of this fuse box, there's 4 large connectors that hold all the wires to the bottom side, connecting all the wires. So those are held in place by these 4 bolts right here. So these are 7mm. So we're going to loosen these slowly with our cordless drill, and you will hear these click when they are all the way up. Now we're going to lift the fuse box up off of this base here, and then we'll be able to disconnect the plugs from the bottom. So there's 4 little clips that we're going to use a flathead screwdriver to release these 4 little clips as we kind of pull up on the fuse box. Underneath from the side, you'll see a large blue connector here with some little holes for your fingers to reach in there and disconnect those. So just kind of wiggle those connectors sideways and those will pop loose. There's the blue one, then next there's kind of a beige colored one. Pop that one loose. Now you can raise it up a little bit more. And you get to this gray one here. And then finally, you can raise it on up to get this black one off. Okay, I'm going to take a handful of zip ties and link them together and go around the hinge on the hood right here. And I'm going to use this to hold these fuse box connectors up out of my way a little bit. So I'll pull these up as much as I can and just tuck these under here. This one will just kind of come over on the side. Okay, now looking down in the fuse box, you can see you've got a couple of nuts and 1 screw that holds the fuse box base down to the battery tray. So we're going to remove those. Now you should be able to lift this fuse box base up and remove it. Okay, now under this fuse box base right here is where the small second battery lives. So this top cover is held in place with 4 bolts, and we're also going to pop loose some of these wires so we can get access to that small battery. Okay, so we're going to use a little pry tool here to pop these wires loose from that top cover. So before you disconnect any of these wires, just like we did with the fuse box, we want to put some labels on here. So I've got a little label maker, so I've already applied this little white sticker onto my wires here. If you don't have a label maker, just use a Sharpie or anything that you can. This one goes over to the negative post of the battery, so that ties the battery's ground into the fender here. And then the other one goes down into, is linked into the positive harness, but it goes down into the engine bay down there somewhere. And then this wire here that runs along the inside lip of the fender, this wire goes down and ties into to the chassis. Now we're going to remove this wire off this little wire chase thing here with our little pry tool. And that'll go back over here out of the way. Now this piece here, you can leave this on here or you can remove it. I'd prefer to remove it because it just frees up a little bit of space. Just use a flathead screwdriver to pry these loose. All right, we'll just set this out of the way. Okay, so this wire bundle here, we'll just come back over the edge of the fender. This is wires number 5 and 6 that connect to the fuse box. So we'll just set these over the fender out of the way. Now we'll get the last 2 nuts holding this little cover placed down with a 10mm. Now remove this little cover and you can see the small auxiliary battery down here. So this small second battery is used to run all of your electrical circuits like your radio, your fans, your air conditioning, anything that needs power while the vehicle is running. When you pull up to a red light and the engine stop-start system stops the engine, all your electronics will run off of this battery, and then when you take off again, the engine will start up off of the full-size battery. But we're going to replace this battery with a second full-size one. So this one's coming out of here and it will not be reused. Okay, so we're going to pull these terminals off of here with another 10mm wrench. And now you can just lift the battery right out of here. Now we'll remove the 10mm nuts holding the battery tray to the firewall. Okay, we're just about ready to pull this tray out of here, but first we're going to groom all these wires back out of our way. We want to get all this stuff pushed back as much as we can out of the way. We've still got a couple little panel clips here that we're going to pop loose to get these wires back that way as much as possible to make it easier to get this tray out. And there's also one right here on the bottom side of the tray. Okay, now the tray's going to go backwards and then we'll try to wiggle it out of here. so now we are ready to drop in our new steel battery tray. One other thing you might want to do is the oil dipstick right here. You might want to just push this back a little bit to give you a little bit of clearance. This is it's not very hard to kind of bend that back out of the way. If your battery tray is bumping that, or if it's bumping the lid, just kind of push that back out of the way. Okay, our new steel battery tray is going to slide in here a lot easier than the stock one came out. So we're just going to go right onto those studs on the firewall and set that right down in there. We'll reuse a couple of these factory washers to secure it to the firewall. And run that down with a 10mm. And then we'll use these short bolts to secure the front side of the tray. Now to secure the fuse box back in here, we're going to take this little piece here, the factory battery cover, and this little threaded insert, we're going to just pinch that from the back side and remove that piece, and we're going to reuse this. So we'll just take this piece and pop it in the middle of this little rectangle hole here. And then we'll take our fuse box base with these notches towards the firewall to allow these wires to go into it, and we'll put that right down in here. Secure that with the factory hardware. Okay, now we can put these fuse box connectors back in place. This one, these are nice because they're just going to snap into this fuse box holder. All right, we'll take our fuse box and set it right on top of here, and it should slide right in here. And then make sure all 4 of these clips are snapped into place. And then when we tighten these 4 bolts here, that will draw those connectors up and seat them fully up on the bottom side of the fuse box. So we're going to use our 7mm socket on a low torque setting. Okay, now we can start grooming all these wires back into place where they're going to go. You got a couple that are going to come right through here and tie into the fender. That's these 2. We're just going to lay these in place for the moment. We're going to pull our post clamps out here so we can see everything. And we're just going to kind of comb these wires out so everything lays out nice and neat. We know this is your alternator, so we're going to tuck it under all the rest of these to get back there to position 7. Lay these over the top. Here's our small one that goes to position number 2. And this is the negative clamp, so that's not going to be used. We're going to tuck it down here out of the way for now. Here's number 1 and 3, so I'm going to go ahead and start getting these connected. Here's my number 2. This positive wire here, we're going to remove this cover because we're not going to need that. So this is going to go onto the positive post clamp right here. So we're just going to kind of groom that into position to where it'll be easy to connect that right there. I'm going to get these started on here just to keep them still. Okay, remember 5 and 6 were over here on the laying over the fender. So we're just going to lay those in place over here. And then last is our alternator cable right here. Let's see, I'm tangled up with this shunt cable here, so I'm going to untangle some of this. I want to bring this on the back side. So these that come across the fender, I've got these underneath. I've got these routed under the post clamp, so those will get tucked down here. All right, so we'll get those hooked back up on the fender. Okay, we're looking pretty good in here. Everything looks like it's kind of lining up fairly well. I think I'm ready to go ahead and tighten down these on the fuse box because those all look good. Okay, I just finished wrapping this factory negative connection up with some electrical tape. I'm going to route this down here and tuck it under the fuse box. Okay, now let's put our fuse box lid back on. If you bumped any of these relays, you might just make sure they're all seated really good so you don't have any weird things happen when you start the engine back up. And we're going to go ahead and attach the power steering bottle to this little tab here. Okay, we're ready for batteries. Cranking battery goes in first. Slide it towards the back. This one is your cranking battery because it has your factory positive post clamp that feeds your alternator and your starter. And we'll drop in the accessory battery at the front. Now we can set our top lid in place. Set that right down on top of the batteries. And just leave these battery post covers in place until you're ready to hook up each one of the wires. So let's go ahead and get this lid secured down first before we start making any connections. Okay, we're going to start with our factory positive over here first. Pull the cap off our battery. You may have to lift this cable up, it's kind of tight. Make sure this post clamp is seated all the way down to the bottom of the post, and then we'll tighten that up with a 10mm. Now we're going to take the factory positive cable from the small auxiliary battery and we're going to attach it to this left post here. Now we're going to attach our cable from the solenoid to the right side post. So we'll remove this one with a 12mm socket. Just put our cable right on there, put the nut back on. Okay, we're done with the positive side, so we're just going to put this little dust cover back on here. Now we'll go to the other positive for the accessory battery. Again, make sure this post clamp is seated all the way to the bottom of your battery post. And we'll use a 1/2" wrench to tighten this one down. Okay, now we're going to work on the factory negative. Now you notice we've pulled some slack on this one, but you'll notice it may not reach over to your factory, it may not reach over to your negative post. So what we're going to do is disassemble this shunt off of here, and we're going to rotate this to give it just a little bit extra room. There's another 10mm nut on the bottom side. So we're going to take this shunt off, and then we're just going to rotate it like this, and that should give us enough room to get that on there. Now we can put the factory connection back on here and put that nut back on. Now we need to hook up the 2 ground wires from our kit onto the stud here under this 13mm nut. And as we mentioned earlier, this cable here goes down to the small auxiliary battery, and we're not reusing that cable. So we're going to remove this one and we're going to secure it out of the way. Now the short wire that feeds ground to our negative bus bar is going to go on first, and then the long wire that links the 2 battery negatives together will go on top of that one, and put the factory nut back on top and tighten that post clamp down. And the last one is the negative post clamp for the cranking battery, and tighten that up with a 1/2" wrench. Now this wire that we removed, we can put a little electrical tape around that and just secure it with a zip tie. Okay, so we're all done with the electrical connections. Now let's just get the air box put back in place. Okay, grab your air box. Make sure you've still got these little rubber feet on the bottom here so they will snap into little holes down below. We'll get this bolt on the fender side. Now make sure this clamp is loosened up and you can kind of raise this air intake up to get the cover all back in there. And secure your lid with an 8mm on a low torque setting. then we'll tighten our clamp back down. And then last is the 2 bolts that hold the air intake in place. Okay, that's it. We're pretty much done here. That's all the connections. Everything is put back into place. The last thing I'm going to do is go around and just double check all of my connections, especially the ones that I use my cordless drill. And I'm going to hand tighten all these post clamps and make sure everything is nice and tight. I'm also going to secure this sensor wire coming off that little shunt back in these little factory clips. There's one there. There's a couple more right up here. And I'm going to put a zip tie around this cable here. Now, if you also purchased our optional G-screen monitoring system that goes inside to show you the voltage levels, that can be plugged in with this single cable and this port right here. So you just pop the dust cover, make sure the pins are lined up right. You'll slide this connector in and then give the little collar a twist lock until it snaps in place, just like that. Now, when you're ready to hook up your accessories, you just route your wires along the firewall, around the fuse box. You've got room to tuck some wires and your inline fuses down here out of the way. This one here is our dedicated power harness for our fridge in the back. You can find this harness kit on our website. So we're going to run the positive ring terminal to the positive bus bar and then the ground right over here. Now, if you have any other heavy-duty cables like winch cables or our quick connect plugs for the front or the rear bumper, you can put those on the center studs. If you have any other low amp accessories like LED lights or a CB or something like that, you can hook those smaller ring terminals to any of these 8 screws in the circle here. Okay, we're all done with the installation. So now, the next time we crank the engine, your alternator is going to charge up your cranking battery first for a couple of minutes, and then the Smart Isolator controller sends a signal to the solenoid to link the batteries together through here to charge up the accessory battery. So at that point, you're going to be using the combined capacity of both batteries together to run everything in the vehicle. And then as they start to drain down a little bit, when they hit about approximately 12.7 volts, it's going to separate the batteries by disconnecting the contacts in the solenoid. That will separate the batteries, and all of the accessories that you have hooked up to the power and ground bus bars will continue to run on the second battery and not drain down your cranking battery. But also remember that your factory fuse box gets its power directly from the cranking battery. So all of your factory circuits will always run from your cranking battery, even when the 2 batteries are separated from each other. So that means your 12-volt outlets inside, your radio, your headlights, all those factory circuits are going to run from the cranking battery. Everything you have hooked up to the power and ground bus bars will run off the second battery and not drain down your cranking battery. I hope this video was helpful for you. If I missed anything, please let me know. You can send us an email to info@genesisoffroad.com with any questions or comments. You can also give us a call at 901-214-5337. Please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We will have some more helpful tech tip videos in the future. And thanks for watching.